All right, so hello. Welcome back to another session of English history. I know it's been an interesting few months for all of you, and I hope that all of you are doing well and that school is okay, life's okay. So let's get started, shall we? Let me share my screen. All right, so today is the 7th session. Welcome back. Let's talk about the Crusades. So, the Crusades were an interesting series of religious wars in history. It was initiated, supported, and sometimes started by the Catholic Church in the medieval period. And these are similar to campaigns. And this goal of these wars is to recover the Holy Land from the Islams. In total, 8 major crusade expeditions occurred between 1096 and 1291. These were bloody, violent, and ruthless wars, and it elevated the status of European Christians and it made them major players in the fight for land in the Middle East. So there were 5 crusades in total, and the dates are down below. You can take a look at that later. So, Henry V. Henry V is an interesting English king. He only ruled for about 9 years, but he managed to do some interesting things. He succeeded the throne in 1413, and he renewed hostilities with France, and he began military campaigns, which is a new phase of the Hundred Years' War, aka the Lancastrian War. He won a lot of notable victories over the French people, including at the Battle of Agincourt. There was also a treaty. So he was given the power to succeed the current ruler of France. And the treaty would also give him an arranged marriage. Oop, that was the wrong thing. So it would give him an arranged marriage, and they married in 1421. And he died of dysentery in 1422. He left a number of unfulfilled plans, which included his plan to take over as the King of France and to lead a crusade to retake Jerusalem from the Muslims. All right. His son is crazy. Henry VI is not a lot like his dad. He became king in 1422. He came to the throne at the age of 9 months. He was a baby. His reign was marked by constant turmoil because he had no idea how a country should have been run. While he was growing up, he ruled from his mother's knee. So the council tried to install him as the King of France, which provided by the treaty. It was signed by his dad, and it led English forces to take over areas of France. They almost succeeded. However, in 1429, we had our famous Joan of Arc, who led a military effort to prevent the English from gaining control of France. So the French forces regained control of their land, so no land. In 1437, he came of age and began to actively rule as king, but he was not very good. To forge peace, he married a French noblewoman and he provided into a treaty. However, he was still hostile with France and it resumed in 1449. When England lost the Hundred Years' War in August 1453, this man had a mental breakdown until Christmas 1454. He did not move, he did not recognize his wife. He was kind of like a statue during this period of time. Henry couldn't control his feuding nobles, so you have the Wars of the Roses, which lasted 30 years from 1455 to 1485. Although the fighting was very small scale, there was a general breakdown in the power of the crown. All right, the Wars of the Roses. These were a series of English civil wars for the control of the throne of England fought between the supporters of two rival cadet branches of the House of Plantagenet. There was the House of Lancaster and the House of York, each represented by the Red Rose and the White Rose. Before you start asking me, yes, Game of Thrones copied off this. Eventually, the wars got rid of the male lines of both families. The conflict lasted through a bunch of irregular episodes between 1455 and 1487. There were a lot of related fighting between before and after this period, though. So the power struggle ignited around social and financial troubles after the Hundred Years' War, which unfolded the structural problems of the bastard feudalism system. It was also combined by the weak rule of King Henry VI, because I told you that he's crazy, and crazy people can't run the country. This revived interest in the House of York's claim to the throne by Richard of York. Historians disagree on which of these factors were the main reason for the war, so let's just say all of these factors played a very important role. All right, Henry VII. You may know him as Henry VIII's dad. He was King of England from 1485 to 1509. He was crowned on the battlefield after winning the Battle of Bosworth, where he defeated Richard III. Later, he married his own niece, Elizabeth of York, to avoid the two families whinging and scraping over the crown. Don't marry your cousin. Don't marry your niece nowadays. That's very unhealthy. But, political marriages. Henry is credited with a number of successes. He supported England's wool industry, and he stood up the Low Countries, and it had lasting benefit to the whole English economy. He paid very close attention to detail, and instead of spending lavishly, he put more attention on raising new revenues and a lot of new taxes. Of course, he did not have to pay for them. All right, Henry VIII. This is a lot of information. Henry VIII was King of England from 1509 until his death. He's best known for his 6 marriages, and in particular, his efforts to have his first marriage annulled. So, annulled what means that the church will no longer recognize your marriage. He disagreed with the Pope on this annulment, and that led him to initiate the English Reformation. He made his own church, which separated himself from the papal authority. He appointed himself as supreme head of Church of England, and he dissolved a lot of convents and monasteries with their monks and nuns, for which he was kicked out of the Catholic community, aka excommunicated. He's also known as the father of the Royal Navy, as he invested heavily in the Navy, increasing in size from a few to more than 50 ships, and established the Navy Board. Domestically within England, he's known for his radical changes to the English Constitution, ushering in the theory of divine right of kings. He also expanded the royal power during his reign. A lot of people didn't agree with his policies, right? So he was like, oh, you're plotting against me, or oh, you're reading sacrilegious things. So he would use these as an excuse to kill the dissidents. Executed. So he achieved a lot of his political aims through the work of his chief ministers. And a lot of them fell out of favor after a relatively short amount of time, banished or executed. Look at that long list of Thomases and one Richard. He was also an extravagant spender. Oh god, he spent a lot of money. He used the proceeds that his dad saved up for partying. He was also continuing on the verge of financial ruin because of the money that he spent. And a lot of his costly and unsuccessful wars, particularly with King Francis I of France, and the Holy Roman Emperor, and King James of Scotland. At home, he also oversaw the union of England and Wales within the Acts of the Laws of Wales in 1535 and 1542. He was the first English monarch to rule as King of Ireland following the Crown of Ireland Act in 1542. All right, so Henry dies, and his son Edward takes the throne. Edward was his only son, so of course he comes first, even if his sisters are older. This was the succession law back then. He was the King of England and Ireland from 1547 until his death. He was crowned on 20th February at the age of 9. He was the son of Henry VIII and Jane Seymour, and England's first monarch to be raised as a Protestant. During his reign, the realm was governed by a regent council because he did not reach adulthood. The council was first led by his uncle, and then by John Dudley, who from 1551 was a duke. So this guy's reign was marked by economic problems and social unrest that in 1549 erupted into riot and rebellion. There was an expensive war with Scotland, which ended with military withdrawal, which was supposed to be in exchange for peace. The transformation of the Church of England into a recognizably Protestant body also occurred under Edward, who took great interest in religious matters. Although his dad severed the link between the Church and Rome, Henry VIII never permitted the Catholic doctrine to be thrown away. It was during Edward's reign that the Protestant faith was first established in England, with reforms that induced the abolition of priests not being allowed to marry in the Mass and the imposition of compulsory services in England, aka you don't have to go to Mass at 6 in the morning or anything like that. All right, let's talk about Lady Jane Grey. Her story is very, very sad. She reigned for 9 days, and most of her supporters abandoned her. She was deposed, and when she was executed, she had to see her husband be taken to execution first, and after that, she was taken to her own death. They were both executed on the February the 12th, 1554. All right, Bloody Mary. It's not the alcoholic beverage, it's the Queen, Bloody Mary, Mary the First of England. He's known as Mary Tudor, who was the Queen of England from July 1553 until she died. She was the only child of Henry VIII by his first wife to survive to adulthood. Her younger half-brother succeeded their father at the age of 9. When Edward became ill in 1553, he attempted to remove Mary from the line of succession. So he proclaimed Lady Jane Grey as queen, but Edward practically gave her a death sentence. So Mary speedily assembled a force in East Anglia and deposed Jane, who was ultimately beheaded. Her head was chopped off. Mary was the first Queen Regnant of England. In 1554, she married the King of Spain, Philip, and she became Queen Consort of Habsburg, Spain in 1556. After her death in 1558, she re-established Roman Catholicism. However, this was reversed by her younger sister, Elizabeth. All right, Elizabeth, Queen Elizabeth I. Also known as Virgin Queen, Gloriana, or Good Queen Bess, she was the last of the 5 monarchs of the House of Tudor. She was the daughter of Henry VIII and his second wife, who was executed 2.5 years after Elizabeth's birth. Her mom, who married Henry VIII, her marriage was annulled, and Elizabeth was declared as an illegitimate child. Her half-brother ruled until his death in 1553, who gave the crown to Lady Jane Grey and ignored the claims of his 2 half-sisters. So his will was set aside, and Mary became queen, who deposed Lady Jane Grey. During Mary's reign, Elizabeth was put in prison in the Tower of London for supporting Protestant rebels, as what Mary thought. In government, she was more moderate than her dad or her half-siblings. She was tolerant in religion and avoided persecution. She also beat Philip's unbeatable Armado. It was beat. All right, that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed this session, and please have a good rest of your week.